What's going on YouTube? Culturedog Sam Hatch back here with some more videos. The very first video I ever put on this channel, which isn't very popular, not as popular as the Laserdisc one that followed shortly, but it was my first Halloween film challenge. Try and watch 31 Halloween or horror films within the month of October challenge, one for each night or day of the month. And I did that as a two-part series, but this time, and I followed it every year, and nobody usually cares, so it falls on deaf ears every time. But this time we're going to break it up by week. So the first week, of October, what have I watched so far? And unfortunately, I got a little bit of a head start. I was on a little bit of a Rob Zombie kick because I knew 3 from Hell was coming out, and I did miss the Fathom event of 3 from Hell, so I'm going to be picking up the 4K when that drops. But in the meantime, I wanted to get Devil's Rejects going, and then after one of my live streams, talking with everybody, I started to hear about how the early Lionsgate Blu-rays were running into disc rot problems, and sure enough, my copy of Devil's Rejects that I got as a freebie when I bought my PlayStation 3, I think there was a mail-in, you could get like 5 or so Lionsgate titles for free. So now I got to spot check them all because they're probably all bad. But I, found out that the manufacturing plant who put those, Blu-rays together, maybe they sucked. But in any case, there's playback failure on a lot of them. So Devil's Rejects was one of the films I wanted to revisit because the first time I had watched it, my nephew was over, and it was like one of those kind of creepy things where it's like, oh yeah, this is pretty over the top. So it wasn't enjoyable. My wife doesn't like the film, but I was kind of more coming from the perspective of, I think the situation was crappy. I don't think the film was crappy. I think I need to rewatch it. So sadly, that was properly outside of the realm of October. So, but I actually enjoyed it a lot, watching it again and not having my young nephew in the house with me. Yes, it was a lot easier to enjoy that film because it is so gross and so uncompromising and filthy. And filled with that hellbilly charm that only Rob Zombie can conjure. But anyways, I mentioned that because that made me want to revisit House of a Thousand Corpses, which I hadn't seen in quite some time. I'd seen pieces of it on home video after, that when friends would watch it, because I know some friends I would like to gather and watch the film, maybe when they were in a alternate kind of mind state. Not saying anything, but I did see it theatrically, and I remember being disappointed the first time I saw it, mostly because there had been so much build-up about the film that it was the film that Hollywood couldn't handle, and America couldn't bear to see exist, and it was supposed to be so groundbreaking and so over the top, and horror beyond imagination kind of thing. And then you find out, it's just pretty much an homage to Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and it was so similar to Texas Chainsaw Massacre and a few other films that. I was like, really? That's it? Yeah. This is it? This is the thing I can't see? This is the most terrifying thing ever? But stripped of all that, I really wanted to kind of sit down and revisit it and kind of assess it anew with fresh eyes. And it was fun. It was a lot of, visually, it's, Rob Zombie's going for the gusto and it definitely bringing a lot of color as well. To the proceedings, and and sure, he's a bit of a hillbilly Tarantino. He's like, what if Quentin Tarantino was all about horror and not about 70s other exploitation crime movies and that sort of thing? It's not that far off, and some of his writing is a little clunky, and it's funny because I actually watched it with the commentary track again that night. So technically I watched this twice because I want to watch it with the commentary track. And it's interesting, especially after watching the Rogan podcast with Rob Zombie, because he's usually pretty reticent. He's not a contrarian, but he downplays things, the importance of things and the quality of things, and he's the last person I would expect to actually want to sit down and talk about his film and the importance of his film and all that stuff. And unsurprisingly, a lot of the commentary track is him just kind of talking about the mechanics of making the film and the experience of it and the ups and downs of the creation of House of a Thousand Corpses. But Rainn Wilson and Chris Hardwick in there, and the coolest thing about it is it's so many. The Rob Zombie experience is great because, much like Tarantino giving John Travolta a second lease on his career's life, Rob Zombie was able to bring all these horror movie and B movie character actors into the spotlight to be like main characters essentially. So you've got Sid Haig and Bill Moseley and Ken Foree and different all these different projects, and they're not treated as these B character actors. They're treated as the stars of the film. So that's one of the coolest things that came out of the Rob Zombie film aesthetic. So yeah, so I watched House of a Thousand Corpses again and quite enjoyed it. I love the Blu-ray. Some of it looks better than others. Is a little bit older transfer, but still, like, some of the bits really pop. It's fun seeing Walton Goggins being like a youngish guy again. I didn't even know how much I loved Walton Goggins when I saw the film for the first time. Tom Toll's in there is great stuff. Karen Black, of course, is fantastic, and Sherry Moon as Sherry Moon, perfect for that role. And but yeah, it was interesting, and I enjoyed it more the second time for sure. So that was the first film I watched. The second film was Lucio Fulci's The New York Ripper. That was the one film on I got that Blue Underground set. I mean, one of the best bargains in like Blu-ray history are those Blue Underground directors compilations. There's a Dario Argento one. I think that's got Deep Red and Suspiria maybe, and maybe Inferno. I forgot what's on that one, but the Lucio Fulci one's got House by the Cemetery and City of the Living Dead and New York Ripper. So you still need to get the Beyond separately, because you need to get the Beyond and you need to get Zombie anyways if you're going full Fulci, and of course many beyond that. But it's like 3 films with special features, etc. It was like ridiculous. It was like $22 or something like that. Such a bargain. But I had never actually watched New York Ripper. So this is my first time actually seeing it, and again, it's completely gonzo. It's got a serial killer that, it's like, what can you do that other gialli haven't done already? It's like, well, how about a serial killer that quacks like a duck and talks like Donald Duck while they stab you? And yep, sure. So throw that in here, and there've been some New York stuff in Zombie as well, but the Fulci stuff. And not even just the Fulci stuff, but just thinking about other Hong Kong films that were shot in New York. There was something about these kind of foreign directors coming to New York and either working outside of permits or whatever, but it's like using locations that nobody else is using. And it's like capturing a verisimilitude, a reality of New York at that time that maybe you would get with a home movie, but you're not getting with like a big Panavision production. So that adds to the kind of coolness, the griminess of it. Just seeing unique locations that nobody else is using and overusing. It's a vicious film. It's total video nasty stuff and some stuff. It's tough to look at. Eyeballs, of course, being damaged as happens in many Fulci features. It's got tons of sex on top of the violence as well. It's got people with repression and hooking up with tricks and all sorts of peep show type stuff going on there. So it's real sleazy stuff, and but I mean, it's got a fun or fun-ish, interesting mystery shooting through the middle of it, in traditional classic giallo tradition, and you're constantly intrigued to find out who the killer is, and there's a classic giallo red herring that leads you to think one thing, but it turns out to be something else. And the characters were interesting, and completely watchable, and gorgeous widescreen photography, and New York Ripper. I was glad I finally got a chance to see it. Not something you want to watch on date night maybe, but I don't know, maybe you would want to watch it on date night. But so that was the second film. And then carrying on the Rob Zombie tradition, as much as I did enjoy his Halloween remake, I never watched the sequel to that, and I wanted to. And if it got released twice in cinemas, I don't know why I didn't get around to seeing it. Probably because I don't have a ton of faith generally in Halloween sequels, and I was probably like, what's he gonna do with it? That anybody else would have done or tried to do with the other Halloween sequels in the 80s, and most of those kind of fell flat for me as well. So maybe that was part of it. There was like that little bit of ennui in my spirit that I didn't want to go check it out and be disappointed, because I did kind of enjoy the vibe of Rob Zombie's Halloween and the characters. So yeah, I have multiple copies of it. I've got the copy in the Shout Factory, Anchor Bay, Miramax, Dimension Films, whatever, the compilation big box set. But then I also ponied up for the great Canadian Blu-ray, which has not the best ultimate picture and sound quality or whatever, but I think it had DTS HD audio. But it's got the theatrical cuts of Halloween and Halloween 2. And the theatrical cut of Halloween is something I really kind of want to revisit, because the whole kind of plot of how Michael escapes from Smith's Grove and all of that plays out differently, and with some interesting actors that aren't in the film otherwise in the director's cut. So I didn't really want to let that go. So I wanted to pick that up in particular. And I was like, well, if I'm going to watch Halloween for the first time, I should probably watch it as I would have seen it in cinemas. So I watched the Halloween 2 theatrical cut, and I really liked it. It's the Halloween films are strangely they seem like to be Rob Zombie's like most personal films. And the first one still did have those moments of cringiness, those kind of really hyper hellbilly bits of 70s trash dialogue that didn't seem like it belonged in that film. It was like a little too Devil's Rejects for that film. But that said, I mean, I loved that whole stuff with Deg Fretch, the opening with the kind of, and I'm sure it annoyed people because it was Michael Myers they were kind of digging into, but just the whole kind of anatomy of a serial killer's mind, and there was some juicy thematic material there, and I really like that opening portion of the film more than the stuff that retreads on the Carpenter film. That was like my favorite part. And the McDowell character, him taking on Loomis was kind of fascinating, and they kind of made him a little bit different and explored that more in the sequel too. And it other horror sequels have gone into how characters deal with the trauma of surviving something like a film like Halloween. And of course there's a little bit of clunky thematic structure going on there, because of course you have a character that's supposedly dead at the end of the first film and has to not be dead in the second film. But Scout Taylor Compton is a different character, a different Laurie Strode in this film, and I really liked what they did with her, and some of the stuff with her and her friends. Howard Hessman showing up as her boss at this record store, and like her and her friends they're a little cheesy or whatever, but the rest of the dialogue is actually surprisingly restrained and well written for a zombie. And this film and the previous one, they seem to be way more personal and human than any of the other films in his oeuvre, his filmography. And I loved that they kind of revisited the sense of rage with the Michael Myers, and the so you one, as a gore fan, you get lots of hyper violence in the film, but there's a sense of this unbridled rage and this level of overkill present in the murders that carries through into this film. And so it actually gives you some pretty intense, meaty Michael Myers moments in the film. And of course he does look like this weird, crazy drifter, like a bulkier Otis Driftwood or Rob Zombie himself in the film. And he does inject this kind of this otherworldly connection to his mother and the young Michael Myers that's now dead, and he's blossomed in this supernatural killing machine. That stuff was interesting because there really isn't that much canon in the Halloween series that I really take to heart that I'd want to see. That said, it does play with a lot of that. There's a really cool, interesting beginning that plays with the hospital concept from 2, and there's a party scene that kind of plays with the party from 5. So there's bits of elements of the Halloween sequels kind of scattered throughout. But I loved that Danielle Harris returned, Brad Dourif returned, McDowell was really doing some interesting stuff. I really liked it. I enjoyed it. And Weird Al Yankovic's in it, so what's not to like about that? but I thought it was one of Zombie's best films. And the fact that it was saddled with all this baggage of being a Halloween sequel, I actually appreciated that he just threw a lot of that out in the trash and just kind of made the film that he wanted to make. So I totally applaud him for that. And it ended up being one of the most watchable Halloween sequels. So now I'm dying to watch the director's cut. So I'll be watching that before the end of the month because I really want to see that cut. I've heard that it's the superior cut anyways. So I'm intrigued to see. I think it's maybe like 13 to 18 minutes longer. I'm intrigued to see what I missed out on. So yeah, so Halloween 2. I was not expecting to like that film as much as I have, and it's kind of haunted me since then. I keep thinking back on it, and I'm like actively excited to watch it again in the director's cut form. So yeah, go figure. So then I decided to jump over into documentary territory with one of many documentaries based on George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead. But this is 2012's Birth of the Living Dead, and it's somewhat truncated. It's only, well, it's not truncated, but it is the length that it intends to be, like just a little bit over an hour. So it kind of counts as a feature film. But it was just an interesting retelling of early Romero and him, working the commercial circuit, working on Fred Rogers stuff, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and the stuff he did, the kind of short pieces for some of those episodes. And it kind of sets the stage for Night of the Living Dead, and it does get into the politics at the time, and the atmosphere of race relations at the time, and Vietnam, and the kind of kettle that was boiling over that Night of the Living Dead kind of was birthed from, and how that connected to it, and in many ways it's just a low budget filmmaker trying to make an impactful, cheap, scary horror film, but then how it became more than that over the years. Really cool stuff. It doesn't get into the John Russo angle as much as to how they split, and he took the Living Dead moniker with him for other projects, and there's some more information to be learned from the Night of the Living Dead overall, but this one was good, and of course lots of George Romero talking moments. I appreciated that. Larry Fessenden in there a lot, and it was on Prime, so I was like, let's check this out, and it was worth sitting down with for an hour or so. And then we decided to dial back from the spookiness, and there's a whole generation of people that grew up with this film, and when they kind of got old enough to have nostalgia for it, that hit like maybe about 5 years ago. So my wife and I, who had completely missed this film theatrically, and it never really kind of connected with or landed on our radars, we just missed the whole experience altogether. Whereas, films like Nightmare Before Christmas, I watched theatrically numerous times. I was a big Tim Burton, Danny Elfman fan at the time, so that was a no-brainer. So I watched that kind of blossom as this, element of nostalgia, and watched the same thing happen with that film. But I missed the boat completely on Hocus Pocus, so I bought the Blu-ray for my wife because she's been intrigued to check it out. Of course, she wasn't excited about the haggish witches in the film, and was more into things like practical magic, obviously, and Charmed and things like that. So she wasn't excited to see the traditional witch stereotype kind of thrown around in the film, but was willing to give it a shot. And it was fun. It was just as much fun as I expected it to be. It's cheesy but interestingly, a lot of the actors in the film never really kind of went on to do much beyond it. I was like, I was expecting all these people. There was the gentleman from NCIS in there as the human form of the talking cat. So I was like, oh wow, I didn't recognize him, and some Doug Jones action in there. But of course, Kathy Najimy and Bette Midler and Sarah Jessica Parker doing good work. And I like the concept of the adults being completely useless in the film. It's really about the kids, and it's their mess to clean up, and they have to save the day. And I love the fact that the adults are pretty much just dancing all night, like it's season 2 of True Blood, and maybe not that sexy, but it's the kids' fault that all these events start happening when the witches are brought back from the dead. yeah, they still have to clean up their own mess, and it's their tale. Thora Birch is really cute in it, and yeah, it's fun. So yeah, Hocus Pocus. I finally saw it. Yeah, so yeah. I'm not winning the awards for finally seeing that because everybody already knows it and watches it over and over again. But yeah, there's a whole generation that was their Halloween film, and now they have total nostalgia for it. So I thank them for bringing it back onto my radar at least. So after that, I went in to the Criterion Collection vaults and grabbed one of the films that I bought. One of the Barnes & Noble sales the previous year. I just wanted to go all horror films, like whatever I could find from Criterion on the horror front, and this one jumped out because I'd heard tales about it, but it was relatively hard to find for many years, and it was Lewis Allen's The Uninvited, not to be confused with Uninvited, the American remake of A Tale of Two Sisters, but it's a kind of jaunty, comedic, supernatural mystery. Ray Milland is great in the lead and very Cary Grant-esque. And it's got a creepy house in the cliffs in England, and even though it's an American film shot in America, it's got this interesting international kind of mystery about it, and it's got a kind of a lot of the same juju and vertigo, like tales of relationships and hidden secrets and how that has led to murder and all sorts of supernatural ramifications of it. But it was given a lot of credit for being one of the few films of the time that treated the supernatural, especially ghosts, as something that's not like a Scooby-Doo trick to get people from buying someone's house or something like that, or just something comedic overall, or some sort of like this has legitimate ghosts in the film. But also it's interesting, the characters' attitude towards the ghosts they're not as powerless against the ghosts. It's really interesting. There's almost like they're menacing and all that. But yeah, it's kind of a very unmodern kind of take on horror haunted house films. So yeah, they live in this haunted house, but they're kind of, I don't know, they're not tormented by it. And then so it's not a really scary film, but it's got an interesting mystery at the heart of it. And this brother and sister buy this house together, which is kind of weird. But then the family that sells them the house has a lot of skeletons in their closet, and they're wondering what's going on, and what's one room in particular is especially kind of grim and changes people's attitudes. And it's got a little bit of Crimson Peak in it, of course, well before, but you can see how it's influenced everything beyond it. But it's not as scary a film as Robert Wise's The Haunting by any means. But 1944. Good stuff. And the Blu-ray's got some other, I think, like radio play versions. I haven't listened to all the extras on there, but multiple adaptations of it on there as well. So a few features at least. It's a cheaper Criterion release anyways, but I'm glad I finally got a chance to check it out, and it was great. I always got to do some Universal Monster films, and since I bought the smaller box set, the 8-disc one that Best Buy had on sale pretty cheap with a bunch of Alex Ross postcards, I got that either earlier in the year or late last year, and I wanted to really dig into that and figured let's fire up some Dracula. So Todd Browning, 1931. I'll probably end up watching the Spanish version as well, just because I really want to dig into all the special features and alternate versions. I used to have the old Legacy collection, I believe it was, DVD with I sold those. I probably shouldn't have, because they had all the sequels, the Dracula sequels and the Frankenstein sequels, etc., on all the discs as well. And this is, the only sequel that's in there, I believe, is Bride of Frankenstein. So it's definitely not complete. There is a bigger box set, but I didn't splurge for that. I just got this cheapy one, but it's a nice collection. And so I watched Dracula again. You got to be in the right frame of mind to watch it, because it doesn't have this, and Frankenstein doesn't have a traditional score, and I don't particularly love the Philip Glass score that's included as an alternate. I don't know, it just seems too busy, like a lot of Philip Glass stuff for me. Maybe I'll have to give it another shot. So maybe I'll be watching this film, or this one 2 times and then the Spanish one as well. But it's easy to kind of nap out while you're watching the film if you're a little tired, because there's long moments of silence and not a ton of Foley effects or anything like that. So it's fun. It's not completely faithful to the Bram Stoker novel, but and it mixes up characters or contracts and expands sections of it. And as much as I love, Bram Stoker's Dracula from Francis Ford Coppola, still love the Todd Browning original. Bela Lugosi is fantastic in it, and it's just got a great vibe, and I love revisiting it around Halloween. So then we split things up a little bit, and I moved outside of the realm of traditional quote-unquote horror and into something that's a little more psychological horror. But I'd been wanting to check it out. It's funny because all of my, not to say my pretentious friends, but all my friends that love pretentious films all particularly hate this one director and his pretentious films. But they lavish praise on every other film director that's pretentious, particularly my nemesis, Paul Thomas Anderson, who I enjoy some of his films, but his fans drive me crazy. And he sometimes drives me crazy too. So I should really hate the work of Darren Aronofsky. But for some reason I don't. And I saw The Fountain with one of my friends that loves pretentious films, and I was blown away by that film, and then he was like, oh, what a pretentious piece of crap that was. And I think part of it is because while Darren Aronofsky thinks he knows everything about these films, and he's cramming, in this particular case, an allegory down your throat, I think there's more going on that maybe he's not even aware of. An undercurrent. So I think these films are kind of sometimes great in spite of his attempts to make them into pretentious crap. So we're talking about Mother, obviously. If you haven't seen it, it was marketed as a independent horror film, something A24 would drop, and then it turns out to be it is a horror film of kinds, but it's a big allegory, and it's obvious what the allegory is, so therefore it raises people's hackles, and they talk crap about it. But the performances are stellar. Jennifer Lawrence, Javier Bardem, Michelle Pfeiffer's y'all, Ed Harris, Kristen Wiig even in there. But the filmmaking is off the chain, and I believe it was done 16 millimeter, which is interesting too, and pretentious, sure. But it's simple. It reminds me of that horrible yellow wallpaper film in some ways that I foolishly watched on Amazon. But it's funny, when it's supposed to be reminding you of dreamlike films from Louis Buñuel, etc. It was ended up reminding me more of films like John Avildsen's Neighbors, and what else? There was a couple other ones that was jumping into mind. I was like, but not anything that clearly would have influenced Darren Aronofsky. But it was a film that he says is not personal, but it feels personal. But it's got layers of it's got this allegory at heart, but it's got a lot of kind of metaphorical stuff. So it's a bit of an onion at the heart. It's it's trying to tell you something. It's trying to say this character is this and this character is that. But it's also a film about a relationship and a marriage and these other characters. And while they're all kind of intended as this window dressing, their characterizations, I don't think are as intended to be personal. It's just, I think they end up becoming more interesting, and that aspect of the story is actually really interesting and well written, even though that's not what Darren Aronofsky wants you to glean from it. That's not what he wants you to focus on. That's just the kind of red herring to lure you in to the allegory. So I understand some people that have a knee-jerk reaction to him, this film is about this and you must like it, and sure, he's probably not a great person to hang out with, and I've heard the tales of Jennifer Lawrence's frustration with being with him during the promotion phase of the film. But the sound design, freaking awesome. It's got this Dolby Atmos mix. I don't have an Atmos rig myself, but even in just 5.1 surround sound, holy crap, the sound design alone was fantastic. The production design is off the charts. There's a lot of murkiness going on, again, maybe because of the 16mm photography. So visually it was kind of on the edge of looking a little funky at times. It is a very dark film, but the staging of it is amazing. The documentary on it is fascinating alone to watch. But because of how real everything was in the making of the film. But so much of it is staged like a traditional horror film, and the subjective camera work or the bits over the shoulder tight in on the character, you never know what's around the corner. So it is scary at times, regardless of the fact of whether or not it's a real horror film, so to speak. And then wrapped it up this week with Frankenstein, just because, I was doing the Dracula. We got to do some more 1931 Universal horror, and James Whale's Frankenstein is, always delightful. Colin Clive's great in it, and Karloff, of course, crushes, and so I'm looking forward to watching Bride of Frankenstein next. And I watched it again with Rudy Bellmer commentary, which is really good, like film class commentary. He's just total info dump, but one of the better info dump commentators out there. I've seen some other, or heard some other commentary tracks where it's just like information, fact, and he's got a really good organized way of dishing out all this, because there's not just the history of the film itself, there's the history of the novel and all the many adaptations and stage plays of the novel. So there's a deep history of Frankenstein lore leading up to the film version from 1931, and then all the tales about the characters and the actors and the director and the making of the film therein. So there's a lot to unpack there, and it was a really fun, entertaining commentary that's kind of kept going fast from start to finish. So that's it for week 1. We'll see what week 2 has in store. I've got a few that I'm planning on watching, and then some that I'm just going to pick off the shelves as we go and see what happens. So keep it spooky, y'all. We'll see you next week and recap again. Cheers.